The sun hung low over the dusty streets of Kibera, a sprawling town in the heart of East Africa where life pulsed with raw intensity. The air was thick with the scent of charred maize, sweat, and the faint tang of despair. Kibera was not just a place. It was a living, breathing paradox, a chaotic tapestry of vibrant hope stitched together with the threads of poverty, crime, and forgotten dreams. Shanties leaned against each other like weary soldiers, their corrugated roofs glinting under the fading light. Children darted through narrow alleys, their laughter clashing with the shouts of street vendors and the distant wail of a siren. This was a town where survival demanded grit, and trust was a luxury few could afford. In the midst of this restless sprawl lived Amara, a young woman whose beauty was as striking as it was burdensome. At 23, her deep brown eyes held stories she would never tell, and her smile, though rare, could light up the darkest corners of Kibera. Amara was a flower seller, or so the townsfolk called her, though the flowers she sold were not the kind that grew in gardens. She worked the shadowed corners of the market, where men with heavy wallets and heavier secrets sought her out. To the world, she was a pariah, a woman marked by her trade, her existence a whispered scandal among the self-righteous. But Amara did not choose this life. It chose her when her parents died, leaving her and her younger brother, Jomo, to fend for themselves in a town that devoured the weak. Each morning, Amara woke before dawn in the single-room shack she shared with Jomo. The walls were paper-thin, patched with old newspapers, and the floor was hard-packed dirt that never felt clean. She would light a kerosene lamp, its flickering glow casting shadows that danced like ghosts, and prepare a meager breakfast, usually a handful of ugali, and whatever vegetables she could afford. Jomo, barely 16, would watch her with eyes too old for his years, his silence louder than any words. He was her reason to keep going, the only tether to a dream she barely dared to dream, a life where they could leave Kibera behind, where she could be more than the flower girl the town despised. Amara's days were a blur of survival. She would braid her hair tightly, slip into a faded dress that clung to her frame, and head to the market. There, she would navigate the unspoken rules of her trade, smiling just enough to seem approachable, but never so much as to invite trouble. The market was a jungle of noise and color, women haggling over tomatoes, men unloading sacks of charcoal, and preachers shouting about salvation to anyone who'd listen. Amara kept her head down, her heart guarded, and her wits sharp. She would learned long ago that kindness was a currency Kibera rarely honored. But Amara was not entirely hardened. Beneath her guarded exterior burned a flicker of hope, a belief that somewhere, somehow, life could be more than this. She saw it in the way Jomo sketched charcoal drawings on scraps of paper, his talent a quiet rebellion against their circumstances. She felt it in the rare moments when she would sit by the edge of town at dusk, watching the horizon swallow the sun, imagining a world where she was not defined by her past. It was a fragile hope, one she protected fiercely, like a flower growing through a crack in concrete. One sweltering afternoon, as the market buzzed with its usual chaos, Amara's life took a turn she could not have foreseen. She was weaving through the crowd, her basket of wilted flowers props to maintain her cover tucked under her arm, when she noticed an old man sitting by the roadside. He was a beggar, his frame frail and his clothes little more than rags. His eyes, clouded with age, stared blankly at the ground, and his hands trembled as he held out a cracked tin cup. The townsfolk passed him without a glance, their indifference as routine as the dust that coated everything in Kibera. Amara hesitated. She had little to spare. Every shilling she earned went to Jomo's school fees or their next meal. But something about the old man stirred her. Maybe it was the way his shoulders slumped, as if the weight of the world had finally broken him. Maybe it was the memory of her father, who'd once told her that kindness was the one thing poverty could not steal. Whatever it was, Amara found herself kneeling beside him, ignoring the curious stares of passersby. "Here," she said softly, pressing a few coins into his palm. It was not much, barely enough for a cup of tea. But it was all she could give. The old man's fingers closed around the coins, and for a moment, his cloudy eyes met hers. There was something in his gaze, something sharp, almost knowing, that sent a shiver down her spine. But before she could dwell on it, He muttered a raspy thank you and turned away. Amara stood, brushing the dust from her knees, and continued on her way. She did not think much of the encounter. In Kibera, small acts of charity were as common as they were fleeting. But as she moved through the market, she could not shake the feeling that she was being watched. It was not the usual leers from men or the judgmental glares from women. It was something else, something that made her skin prickle and her heart race. That evening, as Amara and Jomo sat in their shack, sharing a plate of beans and chapati, the air felt heavier than usual. The lamp cast long shadows, and the distant hum of Kibera's nightlife filtered through the walls. Jomo was quieter than usual, his pencil scratching against a piece of paper as he sketched a bird in flight. Amara watched him, her chest tight with a mix of love and guilt. She wanted to give him more, a real home, a future, but all she had was this life. This struggle. Amara, Jomo said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. Do you ever think about leaving? Like, really leaving? She forced a smile, though her heart ached. All the time. But we have got to be smart about it. Save up, make a plan. He nodded, but his eyes said he did not believe it was that simple. Neither did she. The next day, Amara returned to the market, her routine unchanged. But the old beggar was there again, in the same spot, his tin cup glinting in the sun. This time, he was struggling to stand, his frail body swaying as he tried to cross the road. The crowd surged around him, indifferent to his plight. Amara's first instinct was to keep walking. Kibera taught you to mind your own business, but that same pull from yesterday tugged at her. She hurried to his side, slipping an arm under his to steady him. Easy, she said, using the respectful term for an elder. Let me help you. The old man leaned on her, his weight surprisingly light, and they shuffled across the road together. When they reached the other side, he gripped her hand tightly, his fingers surprisingly strong. You are different, he said, his voice low and deliberate, not like the others. Amara frowned, unsure how to respond. Just, she said, managing a small laugh. You take care. Okay. But as she turned to leave, the old man's words stopped her. Kindness is a seed, child. Plant it, and it grows. She glanced back, but he was already settling back onto the ground, his eyes fixed on some distant point. The words lingered in her mind, strange and heavy, like a riddle she could not solve. She did not know it then, but that moment, that small, seemingly insignificant act was the spark that would set her life ablaze. Days passed, and Amara's routine continued, but the old man's words haunted her. She found herself looking for him in the market, half expecting him to appear with more cryptic wisdom. Meanwhile, life in Kibera grew harder. Jomo's school fees were due, and Amara's earnings were not enough. She took on extra clients, pushing herself to the edge of exhaustion, but the money still fell short. The weight of it all pressed down on her, and for the first time in years, she felt the sting of tears she refused to let fall. One evening, as she walked home through the darkening streets, a man stepped into her path. He was tall, dressed in a crisp suit that looked out of place in Kibera's grime. His face was handsome but cold, his eyes sharp with purpose. Amara, he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. We need to talk. She froze, her instincts screaming danger. She did not know this man, but the way he said her name like he would known her forever set her on edge. Who are you? She demanded, her hand tightening around the strap of her basket. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Someone who knows more about you than you think, and someone who can change your life, if you are willing to listen. Amara's heart pounded. In Kibera, offers like that were rarely what they seemed. But there was something about this man, something that felt both dangerous and inevitable. As the streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the dust, Amara realized she was standing at a crossroads. And whatever she chose next would alter her fate forever. The man's presence lingered in the air like smoke, sharp and unsettling, Amara stood rooted to the cracked pavement of Kibera's main drag, her pulse racing as the stranger's words echoed in her mind. Someone who can change your life. In a town like this, such promises were as common as flies and twice as dangerous. She tightened her grip on her basket, the wilted flowers inside a flimsy shield against whatever this man represented. The street around them buzzed with evening life hawkers packing up their stalls, kids kicking a deflated soccer ball, and the faint strum of a guitar from a nearby bar. But to Amara, it all faded into a distant hum. Her focus was on the man in the suit, his polished shoes absurdly clean against the dusty ground. "I do not know you," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "And I do not trust people who know my name before I give it." The man's smile widened, revealing teeth too perfect for Kibera. "Fair enough," he said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "My name is Victor, and I am not here to hurt you, Amara. Quite the opposite." Victor. The name did not ring any bells, but it carried weight, like it belonged to someone who expected to be remembered. Amara studied him, his tailored suit, the gold watch glinting at his wrist. The way he stood with the confidence of a man who'd never known hunger. He did not belong here. Not in this town where survival was a daily gamble. Yet here he was, looking at her like she was the answer to a question she had not asked. "What do you want?" she asked, taking a step back. The crowd flowed around them, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. Victor lowered his voice, leaning in just enough to make her skin prickle. "I represent someone who has taken an interest in you, someone who sees potential where others see, well, what they choose to see." Amara's jaw tightened. She knew what people saw when they looked at her, a flower girl, a woman who sold more than petals in the shadows of the market. The judgment was etched into every sneer, every whispered insult. But she was not ashamed, not anymore. Shame was a luxury for those who had options. Still, Victor's words stung, and the implication that someone was watching her set her nerves on edge. "Who is this someone?" she pressed, her eyes narrowing.
"Why me?"
Victor chuckled. A low, velvet sound, all in good time. "For now, let us just say my employer values kindness. And you, Amara, have shown it in ways that have not gone unnoticed." Her thoughts flicked to the old beggar, the coins she would pressed into his trembling hand, the way he would looked at her with those piercing, cloudy eyes. "Kindness is a seed, child. Plant it, and it grows." The memory sent a chill through her, but she pushed it aside. This was not the time for riddles or coincidences. "I do not have time for games," she said, turning to leave. "If you have got something to say, say it. Otherwise, I have got a brother to feed." Victor's hand shot out, catching her wrist not hard, but firm enough to stop her. The touch was electric, not in a romantic way, but in the way a predator's gaze locks onto prey. Amara yanked her arm free, her glare fierce enough to make a lesser man flinch. But Victor only looked amused. "Meet me tomorrow," he said, unfazed, "at the old baobab tree by the river. Noon. Bring an open mind. You won't regret it." Before she could respond, he melted into the crowd, his suit a dark blur among the sea of faded colors. Amara stood there, her heart hammering, the weight of his words pressing against her. She did not trust Victor, not for a second, but something in his voice, something certain, almost prophetic, made her wonder if ignoring him would be a mistake. That night, Amara barely slept. The shack was stifling, the air thick with the scent of kerosene and the distant rumble of Kibera's nightlife. Jomo lay on his mat across the room, his soft snores a reminder of why she endured this life. She stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. Who was Victor? Who was his mysterious employer? And why did she feel like her life was teetering on the edge of something vast and unknowable? By morning, her curiosity had outgrown her caution. She fed Jomo, sent him off to school with a stern reminder to stay out of trouble, and headed to the river. The old baobab tree was a local landmark, its gnarled branches stretching like ancient arms over the sluggish, muddy water. It was a place where lovers met, where elders told stories, and where secrets were buried in the roots. Amara arrived early, her nerves taut as she scanned the area for Victor. He appeared right on time, stepping out from the shade of the tree, like he would been waiting all along. But he was not alone. Beside him stood a young man, maybe in his late 20s, with a face that could be belonged to a poet or a prince. His skin was a rich brown, his eyes warm but guarded, and his clothes casual but well-made hinted at a life far removed from Kibera's struggles. He carried between them. Victor gestured toward him. Amara, this is Ethan. My associate. Ethan stepped forward, offering a small nod. It is good to meet you, Amara, he said, his voice low and measured, with a faint accent she could not place. I have heard a lot about you. Amara's brow arched. That makes one of us? Victor laughed, but Ethan's expression remained serious, almost searching. There was something about him that felt familiar, though she could not pinpoint why. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, with a quiet strength that reminded her of the old beggar's cryptic intensity. Let us walk, Victor said, motioning toward the riverbank. We have a lot to discuss. As they strolled along the water's edge, Victor began to speak, his tone casual but deliberate. He told her about his employer, a man he described only as a person of considerable means and influence. This employer, Victor said, had been observing Kibera for months, searching for someone worthy of a rare opportunity. Someone who, despite their circumstances, showed compassion and resilience. Someone like Amara. She listened, her skepticism warring with a growing sense of unease. It sounded too good to be true, like the kind of fairy tale that did not exist in Kibera. But Victor's confidence was unshakable, and Ethan's quiet presence added a layer of credibility she could not ignore. What does this opportunity involve? She asked, stopping to face them. The river gurgled beside them, its surface catching the noon sun. Victor's smile returned, sharp and knowing. A chance to leave this life behind. A new start education. A home. Security for you and your brother. But it comes with a price. Amara's stomach twisted. What kind of price? Not money, Ethan said quickly, his voice firm. It is about trust. And courage. You would need to take a leap of faith. Her laugh was bitter. Faith. In Kibera, faith gets you robbed or worse. Ethan's eyes softened, and for a moment, she saw something raw in them. Empathy. Maybe. Or recognition. I know, he said. But sometimes, the only way out is through. Their conversation was cut short by a shout from the riverbank. A group of young men, their eyes hard and their postures aggressive, were approaching. Amara recognized one of them, Kofi, a local thug who'd tried to extort her before. Her heart sank. Trouble in Kibera was never far away, and she would just walked into it. Amara. Kofi called, his grin predatory. Who are your fancy friends? They got money to share. Victor stepped forward, his demeanor calm but commanding. Walk away, he said, his voice like steel. This does not concern you. Kofi laughed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Ethan moved to Amara's side, his presence steadying her. The tension crackled, the air thick with the promise of violence. Amara's mind raced. She could not afford a fight, not with Jomo depending on her. But before she could act, Ethan spoke, his voice low but carrying an authority that silenced the group. Leave, he said, his gaze locked on Kofi. Now, to Amara's shock. Kofi hesitated, then backed off, muttering curses as he and his crew retreated. She stared at Ethan, her mind reeling. Who was this man? And how did he have that kind of power in a place like Kibera? Victor clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Unfazed. Let us continue this another time, he said to Amara. Think about what we have said. We will find you. As they walked away, Ethan glanced back, his eyes meeting hers for a fleeting moment. There was something in that look, something that made her heart skip, not out of fear, but something else entirely. She shook it off, telling herself it was nothing. But as she headed home, the weight of their offer pressed against her, heavy as the dust that clung to her skin. Back at the shack, Jomo was waiting, his face tight with worry. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice sharp. "I heard Kofi's crew was out." "Fine," she said, forcing a smile. But as she sat with him, sharing a meager dinner, her mind was elsewhere. Victor's words. Ethan's presence. The old beggar's cryptic warning, they swirled together, a storm of questions with no answers. And then there was the offer itself, a new life, a way out. It was everything she would ever wanted for Jomo. For herself. But in Kibera, nothing came without a cost. That night, as she lay on her mat, the shack's walls creaking in the wind, Amara felt the stirrings of something dangerous. Hope. It was fragile. Untested. But it was there, flickering like a candle in the dark. And as she drifted toward sleep, she could not shake the feeling that her encounter with Victor and Ethan was only the beginning, that somewhere out there, the old beggar was watching, his cloudy eyes seeing more than she could ever imagine. The days that followed felt like a fever dream, each moment tinged with the weight of possibility and peril. Kibera pulsed around Amara as it always had, relentless, unforgiving, alive with the clamor of survival. But now, every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every glance a hidden meaning. Victor's offer hung over her like a storm cloud, promising salvation but threatening to drown her in its complexity. A new life for her and Jomo, education, a home, security. It was a dream so vivid it hurt to imagine, yet so distant it felt like chasing the horizon. And then there was Ethan, with his quiet strength and eyes that seemed to see straight through her defenses. He was a puzzle she could not solve, and that scared her as much as it intrigued her. Amara tried to return to her routine, weaving through the market with her basket of wilted flowers, dodging the leers and whispers that followed her like a shadow. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying Victor's words, Ethan's gaze, and the old beggar's cryptic warning. Kindness is a seed, child. Plant it, and it grows. She had not seen the beggar since that day by the roadside, but his presence lingered, a ghost in her thoughts. She scanned the market for him, half hoping, half dreading another encounter. Meanwhile, Jomo noticed her distraction, his questions sharp with worry. "You are not yourself, Amara," he said one evening, his charcoal pencil pausing mid-sketch. "What is going on?" She forced a smile, ruffling his hair. "Just tired, kid. Don't worry about me." But Jomo was not a kid anymore. Not really. His eyes, too wise for 16, saw through her lie. Still, he did not press, and Amara was grateful. She was not ready to share the strange turn her life had taken, not until she understood it herself. A week after the riverbank encounter, Amara's fragile routine shattered. She was in the market, haggling with a vendor over a handful of tomatoes, when a commotion erupted near the main road. Shouts, the crunch of footsteps, and the unmistakable crack of a bottle breaking. Her heart sank. Trouble was never far in Kibera, and she would learn to sense its approach like a storm. She tucked her basket under her arm and hurried toward the noise, driven by a mix of caution and curiosity. The crowd had gathered around a familiar figure, Kofi, the thug who backed off at Ethan's command. He was in a rage, his face twisted as he loomed over a cowering street vendor, a frail woman whose fruit stall had been overturned. Oranges and mangoes rolled across the dirt, crushed underfoot by the onlookers. Kofi's crew flanked him, their laughter cruel as they egged him on. The vendor's pleas were drowned out by Kofi's bellowing. "You think you can short me? I will burn this whole stall down." Amara's first instinct was to slip away. Kofi was dangerous, and she had Jomo to think of. But then she saw the vendor's face, streaked with tears, and something snapped inside her. She would spend too long swallowing her anger, letting Kibera's injustices grind her down. Before she could second-guess herself, she pushed through the crowd, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Leave her alone, Kofi." The words rang out, sharper than she would intended. The crowd hushed, and Kofi turned, his eyes narrowing as they landed on her. For a moment, the air was still, charged with the promise of violence. Then Kofi laughed, a harsh, guttural sound. Well, look who is playing hero. The flower girl thinks she is tough now. Amara stood her ground, her heart pounding but her gaze steady. She does not owe you anything. Pick on someone your own size. Kofi's grin faded, replaced by a scowl. He took a step toward her, his bulk casting a shadow that swallowed her slight frame. You have got a mouth on you, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Maybe it is time someone shut it. The crowd murmured, some egging Kofi on, others watching with grim fascination. Amara braced herself, her mind racing for a way out. She was no fighter, and Kofi's crew outnumbered her 10-1. But before Kofi could make good on his threat, a new voice cut through the tension, calm but commanding. Enough. Ethan stepped from the crowd, his presence like a sudden shift in the wind. He moved with a quiet authority, his eyes locked on Kofi. Victor was at his side, his suit pristine despite the dust, his expression unreadable. The crowd parted for them, sensing something bigger than a street brawl unfolding. Kofi hesitated, his bravado faltering under Ethan's gaze. This ain't your business, he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. It is not, Ethan said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He glanced at Amara, a flicker of concern in his eyes, before turning back to Kofi. Walk away, or you will regret it. The threat was soft, almost polite, but it carried a weight that made Kofi's crew shift uneasily. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Kofi spat on the ground, muttered a curse, and signaled his crew to leave. The crowd dispersed, whispering among themselves, and the vendor scrambled to salvage her fruit, her hands trembling as she thanked Amara with a tearful nod. Amara's knees felt weak, but she held herself upright, her eyes on Ethan. You have got a habit of showing up at the right time, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Ethan's lips twitched, almost a smile. Or the wrong time, depending on how you look at it. Victor stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the scene. You are making waves, Amara, he said, his tone laced with approval. That is good. It means you are ready for what is next. She frowned, her patience thinning. Enough riddles. If you have got something to say, say it. What is this opportunity you keep dangling? Victor exchanged a glance with Ethan, then nodded. All right, let us talk, but not here. They led her to a quiet corner of the market, where a rickety tea stall offered a semblance of privacy. Over cups of steaming chai, Victor finally laid out the truth, or at least, part of it. His employer, he revealed, was a man named Solomon Kane, a billionaire who made his fortune in tech and mining, but kept his identity shrouded in mystery. Solomon was in Kibera, hiding in plain sight, testing the town's heart. He believed true character was revealed in hardship, and he was searching for someone worthy of his legacy. And he has chosen you, Victor said, his eyes locked on Amara. Your kindness to the beggar, your courage just now, it is proof you are different. Amara's mind reeled. A billionaire in Kibera. It sounded like a cruel joke, but Victor's certainty, and Ethan's quiet nod, made it hard to dismiss. Why me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nobody. Ethan leaned forward, his voice soft but intense. You are not nobody. You are someone who chooses to do what is right, even when it costs you. That is rare. Amara. Rarer than you know. Her throat tightened, his words stirring something she would buried long ago. Pride. Maybe. Or hope. But suspicion lingered. What does he want from me? Nobody gives something for nothing. Victor's smile was enigmatic. Solomon wants to give you a chance to rewrite your story. But first, you need to prove you can handle it. There is a task, a test, if you will. Pass it, and your life changes. Fail, and, well, You go back to this? He gestured at the market. The dust, the grind of Kibera. Amara's pulse quickened. What kind of test? Ethan answered this time, his voice steady. It is about trust. You will need to follow our instructions, no questions asked, and face whatever comes. It won't be easy. But I will be there to guide you. The weight of their words pressed against her, heavy with promise and risk. She thought of Jomo, of the shack they called home, of the life she would fought so hard to hold together. This was her chance to break free. But it meant stepping into the unknown, trusting men she barely knew. And yet, something in Ethan's eyes, something honest, almost vulnerable, made her want to believe. Before she could respond, a shadow fell over the table. A woman stood there, her face familiar and venomous. Lydia, a former friend turned rival, who made it her mission to expose Amara's trade to anyone who listened. Lydia's smile was sharp as a blade, her eyes glinting with malice. Well, Lydia said, her voice loud enough to draw attention. The flower girl's moving up in the world, cozying up with rich men. Tell me, Amara, how much are they paying for your services? The words hit like a slap, and Amara's face burned. The market seemed to close in, eyes turning toward her, whisper spreading like wildfire. Her past, the one she would fought to keep buried, was being dragged into the open, and Lydia relished every second of it. Ethan stood, his voice low but firm. Walk away. Now. Lydia laughed. Undeterred. I am just getting started. Everyone in Kibera's going to know what you really are, Amara. You can hide forever. Amara's hands clenched into fists, her heart a war drum. She wanted to scream, to fight, to disappear. But before she could act, Victor placed a hand on her arm, his touch surprisingly gentle. Dante. He murmured, she is not worth it. You are bigger than this. The words steadied her, but the damage was done. Lydia sauntered off, her laughter echoing, and Amara felt the weight of every stare. Her secret was out, or soon would be, and in Kibera, that kind of shame could destroy you. Ethan's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. Amara, look at me. She did. Reluctantly, and found his eyes steady, free of judgment. You do not have to be defined by what she says, or what anyone thinks. You decide who you are. His words were a lifeline, but they could not erase the truth. Her past was a chain, and it was tightening. As they left the tea stall, Victor gave her a final instruction. Meet them at the baobab tree at dawn, ready for the test. Amara nodded, her mind a storm of fear and resolve. That night, she told Jomo everything, not the details, but enough to ease his worry. He listened, his face a mix of awe and fear, and hugged her tightly. Whatever happens, you are still my sister, he said, his voice fierce, and I am proud of you. His words carried her through the sleepless hours, and as dawn broke, Amara stood by the baobab tree, her heart pounding but her resolve unbroken. Ethan was there, alone, his presence a quiet anchor. You ready? He asked, his voice soft. She nodded, though fear gnawed at her. Let us do this. He led her through Kibera's winding alleys to a part of town she rarely visited, where the shanties gave way to an old, crumbling warehouse. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and a single lantern cast long shadows. In the center stood a table, and on it, a small, intricately carved box. Your test, Ethan said, his voice steady but intense, is to open the box. But it is not just a lock, it is a choice. What is inside will change everything, but only if you are willing to face it. Amara's breath caught. The box seemed to hum with a strange energy, its carvings glowing faintly in the dim light. She reached for it, her fingers trembling, and as she touched the wood, a vision flashed through her mind. The old beggar, his eyes clear and piercing, smiling as if he would known this moment would come. The warehouse seemed to fade, and Amara felt the weight of her past. Her choices, her hopes, all converging on this single act. Whatever lay inside the box, it was more than a test, it was her destiny, waiting to be claimed. The air in the warehouse was thick, heavy with dust and the weight of something ancient. Almost sacred, Amara's fingers lingered on the carved box, its surface warm under her touch, as if it pulsed with a life of its own. The faint glow of the carvings seemed to dance in the lantern's flicker, casting shadows that twisted like spirits on the crumbling walls. Her heart thudded, each beat a reminder of the choice before her. Ethan stood a few steps away, his presence steady but silent, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel both exposed and anchored. The vision of the old beggar still lingered in her mind, his piercing gaze, his knowing smile as if he were here, watching, waiting. She drew a shaky breath, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns on the box. They were not random. They told a story, though she could not read it. Spirals and symbols intertwined, hinting at something vast, something beyond Kiberus dust and despair. The box was not just a test. She realized it was a door, and opening it meant stepping into the unknown. Her past, her shame, her dreams for Jomo, they all pressed against her, a storm of doubt and hope. What if this was a trap? What if Victor and Ethan were playing her, dangling salvation only to snatch it away? But what if it was real? What if this was her chance to break free? Amara, Ethan said, his voice low but firm, cutting through her spiraling thoughts. You do not have to do this, but if you do, trust yourself. You are stronger than you know. His words steadied her, like a hand pulling her back from the edge. She glanced at him, searching his face for any hint of deception, but found only sincerity and something deeper, something that made her heart skip in a way she was not ready to name. She nodded, more to herself than to him, and turned back to the box. Her fingers found a seam, a hidden latch that clicked under her touch. The carvings glowed brighter, and with a soft, almost reverent creak, the lid began to open. Inside was no treasure, no gold or jewels, just a single object, a small, weathered journal, its leather cover cracked with age. Amara frowned, lifting it carefully. It was light, unassuming, yet it carried a weight that went beyond its physical form. She opened it, her breath catching as she saw the first page. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, and the words were addressed to her. To the one who opens this box. You have shown kindness where others turned away, courage where others faltered. This is your beginning, not your end. Read and understand. Her pulse quickened. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning passages that spoke of trials, of choices, of a legacy built on compassion. There were instructions vague but specific about a journey she must undertake, a series of tasks that would prove her worth. The journal mentioned a place, a hidden estate beyond Kiberus borders, where the truth awaits. It was signed simply, Solomon. Amara's mind raced. Solomon Kane, the billionaire Victor had spoken of, the man who'd supposedly chosen her. Was this his journal? And why her? She looked at Ethan, her voice tight. What is this? Some kind of game? Ethan stepped closer, his expression serious but not unkind. It is not a game, Amara. It is a path. Solomon wrote that journal for someone like you, someone who could carry his vision forward. But the choice is yours. You can walk away now, or you can follow it. She clutched the journal, her knuckles whitening. And if I follow it? What then? Ethan's eyes softened, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of something personal, something that was not just about the test. Then you will find answers, and maybe more than you expect. Before she could press him further, the warehouse door slammed open, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Victor strode in, his suit still impossibly pristine, but his face was taut with urgency. We need to move, he said, his voice clipped. Now. Amara's stomach dropped. What is happening? Victor's eyes flicked to the journal in her hands. You opened it? That is enough to make you a target. Lydia's been talking, and Kofi's crew is stirring up trouble. They know you are involved with something big, and they are coming for you. Her heart sank. Lydia's venom had spread faster than she would feared, and in Kibera, rumors were as dangerous as knives. She thought of Jomo, alone in their shack, and panic clawed at her. I need to get to my brother. Ethan nodded, already moving toward the door. We will get him. But we need to be smart. Kofi's not working alone, someone else pulling his strings. The implication hit her like a blow. Someone else was watching. Someone with enough power to turn Kibera's underbelly against her. But there was no time to dwell on it. They slipped out of the warehouse, moving quickly through the alleys, the journal tucked safely in Amara's basket. The town felt different now, its familiar chaos laced with menace. Every glance felt like a threat, every shadow a potential ambush. They reached the shack just as dusk settled, the sky bruised with purples and oranges. Jomo was inside, sketching by the light of their kerosene lamp, his face lighting up when he saw Amara, then tightening as he noticed Ethan and Victor. What is going on? He asked, his voice sharp with fear. Amara knelt beside him, her hands on his shoulders. We need to go, Jomo. It is not safe here. His eyes widened, but he nodded, trusting her as he always had. They grabbed what little they could, Jomo's sketches, a few clothes, the last of their savings, and followed Ethan and Victor into the night. The plan, Victor explained as they moved, was to get to a safe house on the edge of Kibera, a place Solomon had secured for moments like this. From there, Amara would begin the tasks outlined in the journal. But Kibera had other plans. They were halfway to the safe house when Kofi's crew ambushed them, emerging from the shadows like wolves. There were 6 of them, armed with machetes and bottles, their faces twisted with greed and rage. Kofi led them, his grin feral as he locked eyes with Amara. You thought you could run. He sneered. You and your fancy friends are done. Amara's heart pounded, but she stood her ground, the journal's weight in her basket a reminder of what was at stake. Ethan stepped in front of her, his voice calm but deadly. Last chance. Kofi. Walk away. Kofi laughed, raising his machete. You are not in charge here. The fight erupted in a blur of motion. Ethan moved with a precision that stunned Amara, disarming Kofi with a swift strike and knocking him to the ground. Victor was equally formidable, his movements almost elegant as he took down 2 of Kofi's men. Amara grabbed Jomo, shielding him as she searched for an escape, but one of Kofi's crew lunged at her, his bottle raised to strike. Instinct took over. Amara swung her basket, catching the man in the face. He staggered, and she grabbed Jomo's hand, pulling him toward an alley. Ethan shouted her name, but she did not stop, her only thought to keep her brother safe. They ran, the sounds of the fight fading behind them, until they reached a quiet corner of town, panting and shaken. Jomo clung to her, his voice trembling. What is happening? Amara. Who are those people? She hugged him tightly, her own fear mirrored in his eyes. I do not know everything yet, she admitted, but I am going to figure it out. I promise. Minutes later, Ethan and Victor found them, both bruised but unharmed. Ethan's eyes searched hers, relief mingling with something deeper. You okay? He asked, his voice soft. She nodded, though her hands still shook. Thanks to you. Victor's expression was grim. This is just the beginning. Whoever is behind Kofi wants that journal, and they will keep coming. We need to get you to the safe house now. The safe house was a modest but sturdy building, hidden behind a grove of acacia trees. Inside, it was a world apart from Kibera's shanties, clean, furnished, with electricity and running water. Amara felt like she would stepped into a dream, but the journal in her hands grounded her. That night, as Jomo slept in a real bed for the first time in years, Amara sat with Ethan. The journal opened between them. He told her more about Solomon, not just a billionaire, but a man who believed in rewriting destinies. The tasks in the journal. Ethan explained, were designed to test her heart, her mind, and her courage. The first task was to find the hidden estate mentioned in the journal, a place where Solomon waited. But getting there meant leaving Kibera, facing dangers she could not yet imagine, and confronting her own past. As they talked, Amara felt a connection growing between them, a warmth that scared her as much as it thrilled her. Ethan was not just a guide. He was someone who saw her, not as the flower girl, but as Amara, whole and unbroken. When he reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure, she did not pull away. "You do not have to do this alone," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am with you. Whatever comes." She wanted to believe him, but Lydia's words echoed in her mind, a reminder of the shame that could ruin everything. Her past was a shadow, and it was growing darker. As dawn broke, Amara made her choice. She would follow the journal, face the tasks, and claim the life she would always dreamed of for Jomo. For herself. And maybe, just maybe, for the spark she felt with Ethan. But in Kibera, nothing was ever that simple. And as they prepared to leave, a new threat loomed. One that would test Amara's courage and force her to confront the truth about Solomon. Ethan, and the beggar whose kindness had set this all in motion. The safe house was a fragile sanctuary, its walls shielding Amara and Jomo from Kibera's chaos but not from the storm brewing within her. The journal lay open on the table, its pages a map to a future she could barely imagine. Yet each word felt like a challenge, daring her to prove she was worthy. Dawn's light filtered through the acacia trees outside, casting dappled patterns on the floor. But Amara's mind was elsewhere, tangled in the weight of her past, the spark of her connection with Ethan, and the looming threat of whoever was pulling Kofi's strings. She clutched the journal, its leather cover worn smooth by her restless fingers, and wondered if she was strong enough to see this through. Ethan sat across from her, his presence a quiet anchor. He would stay up with her through the night, talking her through the journal's cryptic instructions, his voice steady even as her doubts threatened to overwhelm her. Jomo slept in the next room, his soft snores a reminder of why she could not turn back. Victor had left at first light, promising to scout the road to the hidden estate and ensure their path was clear. But Amara knew Kibera too well. Nothing was ever clear, and safety was a fleeting illusion. "You are quiet," Ethan said, breaking the silence. His eyes, warm but searching, studied her with a care that made her heart ache. "What is on your mind?" She hesitated, the truth too raw to voice. Lydia's venomous words still burned, a reminder that her past as a flower girl could destroy everything. The whispers in the market, the stares, the shame, they were chains she would carried for years. And now they threatened to drag her back, just as she reached for freedom. And then there was Ethan, his kindness, his belief in her, the way his touch had felt like a promise. She wanted to trust him, to lean into the warmth between them. But fear held her back. What if he learned the full truth? What if he turned away? "Everything," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "This journal, the tasks, whoever's after us, and me. I do not know if I am the person Solomon thinks I am." Ethan leaned forward, his hand resting near hers, close but not touching. "You are exactly who he thinks you are. You are the woman who stood up to Kofi, who protected Jomo, who gave coins to a beggar when you had nothing to spare. That is not just kindness, Amara. That is strength." His words stirred something deep within her, a flicker of pride she would long buried. But before she could respond, the door burst open, and Victor strode in. His face, "We have got trouble," he said, his voice tight. "Kofi's crew is moving, and they have got help, someone with money and connections. They know about the journal, and they are closing in." Amara's stomach twisted. "How? Nobody saw it except us." Victor's eyes darkened. "Lydia. She has been talking to the wrong people, and now the whole town's buzzing. We need to leave for the estate now, before they cut us off." Jomo appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What is happening?" he asked, his voice sharp with fear. Amara forced a smile, though her heart raced. "We are going on a trip, kid. Pack your stuff." They moved quickly, gathering what little they would brought and following Victor's lead. The estate, he explained, was hidden in the hills beyond Kibera, a place few knew existed. The journal's first task was to reach it, but the journey meant crossing dangerous territory smuggler routes, bandit hideouts, and now Kofi's crew, backed by an unknown enemy. As they slipped out of the safe house, Amara clutched the journal, its weight both a burden and a beacon. The trek was grueling, the sun relentless as they navigated dusty trails and thorny scrubland. Ethan stayed close, his presence a quiet reassurance, while Victor scouted ahead, his sharp eyes scanning for threats, kept pace, his sketches tucked into a small bag, his trust in Amara unwavering. But the tension grew with every mile, the air thick with the sense of being watched. They were halfway to the hills when the ambush came. Kofi's crew emerged from the brush, larger and better armed than before, their machetes glinting in the sunlight. But they were not alone. Leading them was a man Amara did not recognize, a stranger in a sleek suit, his face cold and calculating. He carried an air of authority that made Kofi look like a street dog by comparison. Well, the stranger said, his voice smooth as oil. "The flower girl and her little band. Hand over the journal, and we might let you walk away." Amara's heart pounded, but she stood tall, the journal hidden in her basket. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite her fear. The man smiled, a predator's grin. "Call me Malik. I represent interests that want what Solomon's hiding. That journal's the key. And you are in over your head." Ethan stepped forward, his body a shield between Amara and Malik. "You are not getting it," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Leave, or you will regret it." Malik laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You are brave, but you are outnumbered. Last chance." The standoff stretched, the air crackling with tension. Then, in a blur, the fight erupted. Ethan and Victor moved like a trained unit, disarming Kofi's men with ruthless efficiency. But Malik was another matter. He fought with a precision that matched Ethan's, his movements calculated and deadly. Amara grabbed Jomo, pulling him behind a boulder as she searched for a way out. Her eyes landed on a narrow path winding up the hill, a risky escape, but their only shot. "Ethan!" she shouted, catching his attention. He nodded, understanding instantly, and fought his way toward her, Victor covering his back. They ran, Malik's shouts echoing behind them, the journal bouncing in Amara's basket. The path was steep, treacherous, but adrenaline drove them forward. When they finally reached a ridge, panting and bruised, Kibera was a distant smudge below, and the hills stretched out like a promise. Victor caught his breath, his face. "Malik's not just a thug. He has connected. Someone high up wants that journal. And they will keep coming." Amara's mind raced. Why? What is in it that is worth all this? Ethan's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of hesitation. "It is not just a journal," he admitted. "It is a record of Solomon's work, his plans, his legacy, and it holds secrets that could change everything. Not just for you, but for Kibera, maybe the world." The weight of his words hit her like a wave. She would thought this was about her, about a chance at a new life. But it was bigger, far bigger. And yet, she could not turn back. Not now, not with Jomo's future, and her own, hinging in the balance. They pressed on, reaching the estate as dusk fell. It was nothing like Amara had imagined, not a mansion, but a sprawling compound hidden among the hills, its stone walls blending with the landscape. Inside, it was a blend of modern and ancient solar panels alongside carved wooden beams, bookshelves filled with texts in languages she could not read. And there, waiting in a courtyard lit by lanterns, was the old beggar. Amara froze, her breath catching. His rags were gone, replaced by simple but elegant robes, and his eyes, once cloudy, were clear and sharp, filled with a wisdom that made her feel small. "You She whispered, "The pieces falling into place. You are Solomon." He smiled, the same knowing smile from her vision. "I am. And you, Amara, have passed the first test, but the hardest is yet to come." The truth unraveled over the next hours, Solomon's voice weaving a story that shattered her understanding. He was not just a billionaire. He was a man who'd seen the world's cruelty and chosen to fight it, not with wealth, but with hope. The journal was his life's work, a blueprint for change, hidden in riddles to protect it from men like Malik. And Amara, with her kindness and courage, was his chosen heir, not just to his fortune, but to his mission. But the revelation came with a cost. Solomon confirmed Ethan's role, not just a guide, but his grandson, sent to protect her and test her heart. The spark between them, the warmth she would felt, was real, but it was tangled in duty and destiny. And then there was her past, laid bare when Lydia's rumors reached the estate. Solomon did not judge her, but others in his circle did, their whispers echoing the market as cruelty. The final task, Solomon explained, was to confront Malik and protect the journal as secrets. It meant facing her past, her shame, and the man who'd become more than a guide. As the night deepened, Amara stood with Ethan in the courtyard, the journal between them, their hands brushing as they faced the truth. "I do not care about your past," Ethan said, his voice fierce with conviction. "I see you, Amara, the real you, and I am not going anywhere." Tears stung her eyes, but she did not look away. "Then let us finish this," she said, her voice steady. Together. The battle came at dawn, Malik's forces storming the estate in a clash of steel and fire. Amara fought alongside Ethan and Solomon, her fear transformed into resolve. When she faced Malik, his taunts about her past fell flat. She was no longer the flower girl, but a woman who declaimed her own story. With Ethan's help, she outwitted Malik, securing the journal and exposing his backer, a corrupt official who profited from Kibera's misery. In the aftermath, as the estate stood scarred but unbroken, Amara felt a peace she would never known. Solomon offered her and Jomo a home, a future, and a role in his mission. She accepted, not just for herself, but for the town she would once longed to escape. And with Ethan, she found something more, a love built on trust, forged in the fire of their shared fight. As they stood on the hill, Kibera sprawling below, Amara realized the lesson at the heart of it all. Kindness, like a seed, could grow through the hardest ground, transforming not just one life, but many. And in that moment, she knew she would found her place not as a flower girl, but as a force for change, her roots deep in the dust of home.